Hi guys, so this is going to be a bit off the cuff as I do it, but I've had one person the other day asked about how did I process the images that I'd taken, but I've had it in the past as well, and think I've done one other video before showing you how I kind of process the images. Well, I use Photoshop, don't really use Lightroom, haven't done for a long time to be fair, mainly because I shoot smaller numbers of images or lots of different types of images. So I'm not really a wedding photographer or anything like that. So for me, Lightroom doesn't really suit my style. And I can open multiple shots in one line if I want to, but on Photoshop. But we're going to do one at a time, and I'll show you kind of how I did it. And I try to keep the images either as untouched as possible, or just the odd little tweaks here or there. I may do a little bit of editing properly, like color changes and add in things occasionally or remove things. And if it's portraiture, do some skin smoothing and things like that. But generally, I'll try and still keep it as realistic as we can keep it, kind of thing. So yeah, as you can see here, this shot, the tree. Shot in the RX10 Mark IV. As you can see there, the number up the top there says RX on it. So I'll show you what I had done. So reset to open is how I'd actually edited it. I'd actually removed a lot of the green and brought out the browns and everything on the trunk. So how I did that was I upped the contrast a little bit, reduced the highlights, shadows up slightly, the whites down slightly, the blacks down slightly to give it a little bit of shadowy and a bit of moodiness in there. Clarity up a little bit, but if you bring the clarity down, you'll see it sort of softens it. So depending on how you want it to look, you can go crazy or go the opposite way. It doesn't actually look too bad on low, but I just thought crank up a little bit. Vibrance is on +15, saturation on 0. If we go to detail, we've got no noise reduction added, but we could add a little bit just because we're up at sort of ISO 320. Just smooth that image out a little bit. Detail and sharpening. Sharpening I have 40 generally on all my all my editing as a preset. And then we go to color mixer. And hue and everything I've not touched, but saturation, you'll see here the greens is now being taken right down to -100. So as you can see there, if we crank it the other way, some people might like that, but at the same time, I don't. So I thought actually we could drop it right down. And I've also reduced the oranges as well, because that had a little bit of effect on there as well. And then I just left it as is, really. And that's kind of that one image as I decided that I thought I'd quite like it. So we'll open that, and then we go into Photoshop, and then we could start messing around with things and doing whatever you want to do with it. But generally, I would have just saved that, and that's the image done. Next one was and then the other thing as well is if you go filter in Photoshop, and you can go back to camera raw filters, which basically takes us back into the raw side of things. Black and white. Does black and white suit it better with a little bit of messing around? It might. Something like that. It's a difficult one because it's all personal choice. It does give it an interesting look, I suppose, in black and white. It's a hard one, so you can look at it between there and there. Obviously, it's personal choice at the end of the day. I'm not going to open it like that, but there we go. That's that shot. The only thing about this shot is that is your area of what your focus point as such. It's a lot of messiness going on around here, which yes and no, it kind of works to a degree, but end of the day, it's an image that if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. The only other thing you could think about doing is it'd be really crazy and actually shove it through a 45-degree through one corner kind of view, and it could look interesting to some people. Yeah, so who knows? That could be also a different way to look at it. You could also do a sort of maybe a 1/3 to 2/3 crop, so the tree is now on the left hand side a bit more compared to the middle, but I quite like it in the middle to a degree. Next shot, what did we do? We did I was going to talk about the dynamic range of the RX10. So I'll open this shot here, he says. There we go. So let's go back to defaults. So I exposed for this area here to kind of give me the best sort of chance, really. You've got detail, obviously, of the leaves and stuff in shot still. You can see the ground and everything is okay, but the sky completely bleached out. So what we can do is start to drop down the exposure, and as you can see there seems to be quite a bit of detail in the sky there from the clouds, and this is where we can just crank up the shadows on the RX10 to a degree, and then we've still got that detail there. Because you've got to remember, this sensor on this camera is a sensor that basically gives you about 800 ISO of dynamic range that you can use without any real worry about your exposure. We'll also drop down the highlights, because then we can see a bit more. As you can see there, it's dropping down, it's bringing out some more detail. That means now I can actually crank up the exposure again a bit. So now we're getting more of a balanced look. Just drop it down. We can drop it down even more, the highlights, and then we're starting to get, and some of the whites, starting to get some of that more. It's coming through. Saturation, we can crank up a little bit to bring out the colours of the leaves and the greens and everything on the ground. But now you can see there the whole sky and everything has come through with no real drama. Blacks, obviously, you can bring up and down as well, but that doesn't really need to be. So it just shows you how much dynamic range the camera's actually got that we had captured in RAW anyway. The detail of the sky there, even the clouds and everything like that. So, you know, we can then do that. So I've excuse me. Clarity, obviously we can crank that up a bit to bring out the sharpness of the leaves and stuff and the branches a little bit. And there we go, it's not too bad. The only thing I can see is a little bit of purple fringing here, I think. It's not too bad, actually. It might just be my screen. So if we go down to optics, we've got the purple hue there. We can, oh, it is a little bit there, actually. Yeah, it's gone there. So there you go. That's kind of an image as I kind of wanted to see it, you know. Cropping wise, don't think it needs much. I think the way the sky and everything comes in is quite nice, and you've got the little, as I called it, the rally stage. Looks like a bit of a fun rally car track that you could be blasting through the woods. And then we'll do another one. What else we got here? We have, this is one that was probably one of the shots. Is that it there? That's a JPEG. That's the RAW. So this is the leaf shot that I had to stand back and shot in small spot through all of the branches and everything like that. Again, it's quite a messy image, but your depth of field is nice and shallow. You can see the leaf at the angle I wanted it to be, which obviously makes a huge difference in that. If we go to default, so as a photo, is it that bad? I don't think it is, but it's a little bit underexposed. So if we crank it up a bit, we can bring about some of the colour. That's what I'm saying. You've got so much dynamic range in processing. So much there that we can make it brighter or darker, so you don't have to worry if you underexpose a little bit. I've gone up 2 stops with no drama whatsoever. Like, there's no issues at all. So highlights now we can have a look at, drop them down a little bit maybe. Shadows, I quite like the shadows on the bottom of the branch there, so we do need a little bit of shadowing there. Whites and everything. The only thing I did change was the colour, the temperature, sorry. So drop the white balance down a bit so it looks a little bit cleaner. And then, this is where I'm going to do a little bit of editing in a second, is that. So if we go the leaf itself, so do we need a bit of clarity? Depends how you want to look at it. I think I'm going to keep it as soft as possible, he says. There we go. If we go to color mixer, and this is where obviously we can mess around with the saturation. So we could literally drop it right back, or we could go like that. And actually, we don't really need to do anything else. The only other thing there is it's adjusting other colors in shot. So I think that's quite nice. We could drop the greens back down so they die off a bit, but they're not too harsh anyway. Just check the blue situation. There's a little bit on the leaf there, which I'm going to drop back as well. We could take away that quite a bit, the blue, and actually drop it down so it's more of a neutral, almost black and white, but not. And then go from there, really. Obviously, you've got luminance. You can obviously make that leaf darker or lighter with a bit more colour there. But again, that is down to personal choice at the end of the day. So you just mess around, and like I say, you've got all these sliders and everything everywhere. Do we need a bit more clarity? Again, I kind of like it like that because it makes it look rough and ready. But at the same time, I quite like it. Well, it's too soft, but yeah, it's all right. Sharpening, everything is 40 still. Detail 25. Masking, don't really need to. Noise reduction, I'm just going to put a little bit there just because, actually we're ISO 100, we don't need any. Totally fine. But that's the image, So it's just a case of, how do you want it, There's a little bit of grain there, but then it was a miserable, rubbish light day, so it's not too bad. When you look at the image as a whole, it's pretty clean. It's how do you crop it? So I would personally crop it by adding that branch through the top corner, and then we'll just tweak it a little bit there. So we're losing a bit of image, but now it looks a little bit more pleasing to the eye because now we've got a few triangles and stuff everywhere, and that's still hanging pretty much vertically. But yeah, it is what it is. Like I say, it's all personal choice. This is how I kind of edit stuff. I'll do another video because I've been out today, out and about down on the beach, and it was a really windy day today. So I'll do the editing part of that as well. But I think this is kind of just shows you what I do. I hardly touch them really. I do a few little tweaks here or there with the colours and stuff if I need to. A little bit of noise reduction if I need to. A little bit of sharpening if needed, but not much. Mostly cropping, to be fair. A little bit of cropping here or there. Make sure the colours look good. And I tend to leave them alone because we're so used to now with all these filters on TikTok and Instagram and all these places like that. I actually quite like trying to leave it as natural as possible. So that's the way it is, I think everyone's got a bit obsessed with editing too much. Not everyone, obviously, but a lot of people out there do. They rely on the editing rather than actually getting the techniques correct as much as possible in the camera. Obviously, I've only tweaked these a little bit. Sometimes I couldn't really use the flash for this picture because I was shooting through loads of branches and stuff, and the flash would have literally just bounced off all those and caused lighting problems in its own right. But, if you had a torch, for example, you could pinpoint a torch and just light that leaf a little bit, and then you could control your exposure around. But like I say, there's lots and lots of different ways of doing things. Is it right or is it wrong? It's subjective, but this is the way I like to do it. I try and keep it as realistic as possible, like I said. I hope you found that a little bit interesting, and I hope that it may have helped people a little bit. Any questions, feel free to ask. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, little notification bell as well. And please share the channel, like I said before. I'll catch you later.